Hi, I'm Zach Davis, co-host of Jesuitical, a podcast for young Catholics. You're about to hear a conversation with Father Mike Schmitz. If you enjoyed this video, please search for Jesuitical wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos just like this one.
Joining us from Duluth, Minnesota is Father Mike Schmitz. Father Mike is the chaplain for Newman Catholic Campus Ministries at the University of Minnesota in Duluth and the creator and host of the Bible in a Year podcast. Welcome to Jesuitical, Father Mike.
Thank you very much. I am really glad to be here.
We are so excited to have you. So last year, you made some big news when the Bible in a Year podcast skyrocketed to number one on the Apple Podcast charts, and we want to get to that. But we want to start with your day job. You've been a campus minister for far longer than a podcaster. So can you start by just telling us about a day in the life on campus for you?
Yes, and thank you. Thanks for asking that, because nobody ever, they think that's what I do is just read the Bible out loud into a microphone all day, which is only one of the things I do. This is the start of my 18th year on campus.
Wow.
Which is crazy. I just think I was ordained to be a parish priest, and my bishop at the time, he was now the Archbishop of Cincinnati, Archbishop Dennis Schnurr, he said, "I want you to be on campus. I think that'd be a good thing." So great. And they never moved me. And so
did you go in when you first arrived? Were you excited about the assignment, and did it just fit right away, or were there some growing pains?
Oh, I was so excited. In fact, it was my first assignment. So when I first got ordained, the bishop said, "Okay, you're going to be at the cathedral and you're going to be on campus at the Newman Center." And I said, "Great." And then I had the whole summer of planning this, we're going to get ready to launch. And then right before school started, a priest in our diocese unexpectedly died. And so they had to shift a bunch of guys around. So I was one of the shiftees. I got shifted up to a town called Hibbing, Minnesota, which is Bob Dylan's hometown, and also Kevin McHale's hometown, and next to Judy Garland's hometown. Anyways, all the names, those are the three famous people from Minnesota, not counting Prince. Anyways, so I got assigned up to Hibbing, and at first I was so heartbroken because I was just getting a chance to be on campus. And then I realized really quickly when I got up to parish, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I needed. I've spent my entire life in school. I've spent my entire life, the last 9-10 years on a college campus. I needed to be able to have, this is what real life looks like in many ways. This is what family life looks like. This is what people look like when they're not your exact age. And I spent 2 years up there. And then they moved me back down to the University of Minnesota Duluth right after that. And I was so grateful because by that point, I think I was a little bit more ready. When I first got to campus, I was kind of living like a college student. I would start meetings at 11 o'clock at night. And people they kept telling me, you're going to get burned out. You're going to go old someday. You're not going to be able to do this. I'm like, yeah, I know that day's going to come, but it's not here now. Well, I have to tell you, it's here now. So So I get up about 4 o'clock every morning and go drive to the other side of town here and work out.
Wave at the people leaving parties on your way to the
that's
gym.
No joke. That is no joke. Our next door neighbors. Last year, we had a bunch of our students. Now we have a whole row of houses here, and most of them are rented by our Newman students, our Catholic students on campus. And so one morning, I got up and I was driving away, and I was like, "Wait, those lights are on. There's a bunch of people. What the heck?" So I pulled into their driveway and ran up to the door, and they're like, "Father, hey, do you want a beer or do you want a coffee?"
Oh, that's awesome.
I
love that.
You guys are the best. I will take a rain check on both because I'm going to go work out now. But so I get up pretty early, and then when I get back after working out, right now these days I've been recording the Catechism in a Year, and so that's been the new project. So I get back from the workout, record an episode or two if I can, and then we have a holy hour with our students, with our focus missionaries, and then right after that it launches into it's just, that's when the day takes off like a rocket ship, it seems like. And that trying to write back to people who've written, trying to call back people I need to call back, trying to like just arrange the day, just get the kind of the busy work of life done, as well as kind of doing some study. And that lasts until about, well, it depends. Sometimes it lasts until 11, sometimes it lasts until noon. And then I have just meetings the rest of the day. And so it's spiritual direction. It is meeting with, like, you know, if we have some staff stuff going on. We don't have a big staff. We have a coordinator and we have a director of marketing and events, kind of a thing. But it's meetings and a lot of direction, a lot of spiritual direction. And then we have mass and, you know, then we have an evening event every evening. So some nights we have, you know, RCIA classes or Bible study. We have, a ton. There's something every night. And then in those events every night, I'm thinking, when can I go to bed? When can I go to bed? When can I go to bed? So that is a really brief thumbnail sketch of what the day looks like.
All right. Well, sorry for adding to your email load by pestering you to be on the
it's
on the podcast.
Wonderful.
Now, we mentioned Newman a couple of times. Could you maybe just explain for maybe someone's never heard of what a Newman Center is?
Right.
What's the idea behind that?
I kind of just used the term without describing or defining the term. So a Newman Center began back in the day where you have Catholic colleges that typically have a Catholic campus ministry because it's a Catholic college. But then you have state schools that didn't necessarily have a place for Catholics to come or a place for Catholics to have some ministry done to them. So years ago, people developed these things called Newman Centers inspired by John Henry Cardinal Newman. And so basically on state schools, we have the opportunity to have campus ministry that is of a Catholic distinct, whatever, that's Catholic.
Flavor, yeah.
Flavor. I was trying to think of the word. I was like, what is flavor is the word. Identity. And so when someone refers to a Newman Center, typically what they're referring to is the Catholic campus ministry on a public school campus.
And what does that look like on a public school campus? I mean, I know you've only been at a state school, but like traveling around a lot, like how does, I guess, Catholic ministry's relationship to the wider community differ in that context?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had a how to say this, because it's different in so many ways. It's almost like you get to do ministry in the world, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it, because we don't really have a church of our own. We have a Newman house, right? And then we've converted the 2-car garage into a daily mass chapel. We have adoration all day, and we have 30 Bible studies that are happening all throughout the week. But when it comes to Sunday Mass, we go onto the campus and we have a ballroom that they've let us use on Sunday mornings, and we set up tables we set up chairs, we set up the altar, all those kind of things, and so we basically get to have Mass on campus. So the benefit is we're there in the same place that they have all the other events. The negative part is we don't have our own space really. And no, there are some other Newman Centers that are phenomenal, and they have like massive Newman Center itself, and they have a great opportunity to do ministry out of their own chapel. And God willing, someday we're going to be able to do that. But right now it's really compelling. We have church without walls is how we kind of try to look at it and spin that to look at the silver lining, because we're in and amongst people who are open to us, people who are indifferent, and people who are hostile. And it's really good to be in that place. I sometimes think about if I was in a parish, I wouldn't get all these opportunities that I get to interface or interact on a regular basis with people who don't like me or with people who don't like what what we are as Catholics. And I think that's really helpful and really humbling to be in a place like this.
Right, because in a parish, like, you drive to the parish because you're expecting to talk to the priest, and you are in Catholic mode, and you're probably inclined favorably towards it. But it's got to be totally different on a public school campus.
Yeah, so I went to a public university, and we didn't have a Newman Center, but we had Catholic campus ministries that I was involved with. And I think one of the tensions for us was, you want to create this really strong community, an oasis within the larger university setting for Catholics who want to be there. But you also want to have some sort of outreach to those who, as you said, are disinterested or even hostile. So how do you strike that balance, and what efforts do you make to reach those kind of on the margins?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things we try to do is we realized over the course of years that we can never control how people respond to us. We never control how people can respond to our invitation. But what we can do is we can keep inviting. And so what we try to do when we're on campus is we try to have events that, of course, they're events that are specifically Catholic. So, for example, Sunday Mass, that's a pretty Catholic thing to do. We have, as I said, daily adoration. That's a pretty Catholic thing to do. But we also try to have, speakers and presentations that don't just appeal to someone who already is sold, already bought in, but like, no, here's a compelling presentation of relationships, on a topic from a Catholic perspective. But even if you don't believe in God, you're going to get something out of this because this is very practical as well. And so we try to do those kinds of events where we're just proposing. One of the things I love that we do is are you guys familiar with Alpha?
Vaguely, like the parish small group ministry? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what it is, it came out of the Anglican Church in London, and there's a Anglican priest named Nicky Gumbel, and at one point he was assigned to a parish in downtown London, and he quickly realized that he was irrelevant, and what he was offering was irrelevant to the people there. I mean, that they considered what he was offering as a Christian irrelevant, and so he said, "Well, how do we bridge that gap?" And so he started having these things called Alpha, where you have a shared meal. You have a presentation on some aspect of the Christian faith, kind of a mere Christianity kind of a thing, and then table discussion. And one of the things, and that's grown for years and years. And so we have been using that model for years now. And it's I don't want to say one of the best things we do, but it's one of the most fruitful things we do, because tonight we'll have our first Alpha night. And again, we'll have a big meal. We'll have a quick presentation, and then we'll have just table discussion. And table discussion is great because one of the things that we try to invite our students to do is we say, listen, during the presentation is where we tell them what we believe. During the table discussion is where our guests get to tell us what they believe. And so almost every year at my table, I have atheists. Almost every year at my table, I have people who, they're just like, well, here's my issue with, and fill in the blank. I'm like, this is good. And because what we invite our students to do, and myself to do, is, we're just here to talk about it and discuss. I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to convince you of anything, because again, the presentation was where we tell you what we believe, and now we just want to hear what you believe. And I found that to be so fruitful. In fact, there's just, I can share one story about this.
Yeah.
Here was, we had a young woman who came to UMD on a basketball scholarship. And I remember I first met her when she was being recruited because she wanted to meet the priest on campus. And like, oh, that's me, Her name's Jenna. And Jenna showed up and she's like, I can't wait to help all my teammates, come to know God. I just want them to, believe. I want them to come to Mass. And so Jenna, as a freshman, starts trying to start a Bible study with her teammates, and no one wants to come. Maybe a couple of girls want to come. Anyways, over the course of years, she's inviting them to her Bible study. No one's coming. And this is not someone who's weird. I mean, she's a charming, lovely, normal human being. It's because, anyways, but she's inviting them to Mass. No thanks. Inviting them to Bible study. No thanks. Sophomore year, some more people are coming. Her junior year, more people are coming, but she had this one friend named Allison, and Allison was the center, and Allison just was she's like, no, I hate the Catholic Church. I hate everything it stands for, and I'll never come to your Bible study. And Jenna's like, well, how about come to this Alpha thing? She's like, what is that? Well, it's after practice, and there's a free meal. And she's like, fine, I'll go. And so Allison
always
starts
a good
coming
strategy.
to this. Oh my gosh,
feed them.
completely.
Just feed people. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also Allison went, so she shows up. And here's a very clear and compelling presentation of this one aspect of the Christian faith that night. And then she's able to offer her objections, and that's a good point. Yeah. Well, you want to come back next week? And she's like, wait, you're not mad at me because I disagree? Like, no, come on back. And so then Allison came back the next night, and finally, after a couple of weeks, she started going to Jenna's Bible study. That year, Allison entered RCIA.
Wow.
And when she graduated, she became a focus missionary. And now her name is Sister Maria Luce. She is she's one of the handmaids of the Heart of Jesus.
Oh
we
my
have
gosh.
and it's just one of those, and that's not uncommon. I mean, the religious life part, that's uncommon.
Sure.
But it's not uncommon for people who. And so, we're going back to the original question, like, what do you do? I think one of the things is we have to put ourselves out there, and be willing to be rejected, A, but then B, be willing to be patient, because it takes people time to trust you. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do is everything we offer, just like, we don't want to impose on anyone. We don't want to, we're not here to, we just,
do you think
I
that
will
young
never
people
listen
coming
to
into
someone unless I trust.
Do you think that young people coming in right now are default skeptical, or like what are the issues that they're really grappling with spiritually?
Yeah. Remember, and I'm sure you know the quote from Archbishop Fulton Sheen that there are not 100 people in the United States that hate the Catholic Church, but there's thousands and thousands who hate what they wrongly conceive the Catholic Church to be. Mm-hmm. I remember he must have said that probably in 1950s or something. I find that's probably even more true now, because that is one of the things. I mean, I remember, I can't tell you how many students who, before they were introduced to like even just our Newman community or our Catholic campus ministry community, were even kind of afraid, not just skeptical or cynical, but we're afraid, like, will they just judge me? But what if I'm not Christian? Like, oh, you really actually genuinely think this? There was a book called Unchristian that came out a bunch of years ago, and they took a look at what do non-Christians think about Christians. Because I know what Christians think about Christians. We think that, oh yeah, what are the words that define us? Well, grace and mercy and joy, these kind of things. And they said, okay, what are the words that non-Christians associate with Christians? And they were words like bigot and hypocritical and elitist and judgmental. And it was like, okay, if that is how people are approaching, they don't even have to be cynical or skeptical. That I would be afraid too. I would be hesitant. And I find that sometimes is the case. So maybe not so much.
Yeah, but where is that coming from? It doesn't come out of thin air. I think it comes for a lot of people from a real place of hurt. They feel like things they've heard from Catholic leaders have sort of put them on the outside and maybe discounted their experience. So how do you try to bridge that divide that comes from real pain?
Well, that's a great question, because I would say that my experience, again, and this is just super limited just to myself. My experience has been that it has been hearsay, not immediate experience. When it comes to here's our college students. Now, people who are a little bit older, that might be the case, or people who have actually experienced the real abuse or mistreatment in the church. That which is real, of course, but I would say that the vast majority of those students that I encounter haven't, again, this is just unlimited, haven't personally experienced Catholics being bigoted or prejudicial or elitist, but it's been a stereotype, for lack of a better term. Mm. And again, that's not everybody, obviously, but that's what I've found.
Yeah, I guess we oftentimes where we get people is like sort of on, I would say a lot of our audience was super invested in campus ministry, got dropped in a new city, have a hard time, and then I don't know, maybe summer of 2018 happens and it's the abuse crisis, or they're watching the country get super polarized, and they're watching the Catholics they follow on social media also get super polarized, and so they'll have this idea of what the church is or what the U.S. bishops are. But they might not, maybe to your point, they don't know their bishop necessarily or their parish priest anymore. And so it's almost become the brand of U.S. Catholicism is really what's turning them off. And part of that is our own doing, true, but brands kind of take on a life of their own for sure.
Right. Yeah, no, I wouldn't argue that. I wouldn't argue with that at all. And again, going back to there are people who have, and individuals who have real difficult experiences, and to use the word difficult is I'm trying to encompass everything from that was troubling to that was devastating, right? So
so the ones that maybe are open, they have maybe 1 foot in, 1 foot out, they're coming to the Newman Center, but they're not fully committed yet. What are their big questions that they're coming to you with? What are they grappling with in their spiritual life?
Well, and that's an interesting question, because I think it's as varied as individuals are, that there is a certain kind of cultural things where there are some of the big questions that people who are, I don't want to say, kind of on the outside, or like you said, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, that they're wrestling with. And those are typically, where does the church stand outside of the culture? Or where does the church stand opposed to the culture? or where the culture might be going. And those are some of the areas, obviously, that people like say, how do I understand this? How do I make sense of this? And I mean, you don't have to be a rocket surgeon to know that a lot of those questions surround the area of sexual morality. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, okay, that simultaneously is like, okay, that makes sense, because, well, a couple of reasons. One, we all are sexual beings, and so that's part of being human. Secondly, it's a very important part of being human. Thirdly, it is, I would just say, gosh, in so many ways, for those who have encountered the Lord, it can become an ancillary question. But for those who have not yet, it's of paramount importance. Mm-hmm. And that's not meant to say, and when I say that, I know that could sound condescending to those who have those questions. Like, you haven't really encountered the Lord yet. I don't mean that, but it's the church's teaching on sexual morality is no more contrary to human nature than any of its other teachings on any other kind of morality. But it is contrary to our culture's way of looking at human beings and sex and relationships.
Now, there are a number of approaches that people are kind of taking to, relaying some of these controversial teachings. And Pope Francis has said, look, we don't need to always be talking about them, not to hide from them, but we could, there's as you said, there's a number of other Christian teachings that are very countercultural. Other people think we need to kind of just double down or re-explain it again, but maybe on a new medium. And some people really want to stay in the church and try to, people say change it or develop it or whatever. How do you strike that as a public figure, both as a public figure on campus, but also in your podcasting ministry?
There are principles and there are policies, and I keep coming back to that. I think you even mentioned here, Catholic figures weighing in on social media or weighing in on various platforms about their thoughts. Typically, their thoughts would be on policies, as opposed to on principles. And I want to always be conscientious of the fact that my idea of a policy is going to be simply my opinion. And my opinion is worth very, very little. But when it comes to a principle, that's going to be worth a lot, because it's not just my opinion. This is the truth. So as an example, and I used this example in an interview I did a couple weeks ago, but when it comes to Catholic social teaching, there's the paradox of Catholic social teaching, which is, on the one hand, we believe in the universal destination of goods, which means all the resources of the world are meant to provide for the needs of all the people throughout the world. So the universal destination of goods. That is balanced. Well, it looks like it's contradicted by, but it's not. It's a paradox with the right to private property. And so the right to private property, though, has limits. We have a right for that, but that's limited by the universal destination of goods, right? So there's that sense of it's both of these things. It's like you mentioned, paradox, the Catholic both and. And so I'm not going to come in and say, here's my opinion on how the policy of these two principles should be in effect, because I don't know that. And I think something is similar when it comes to when someone says, here's where the church should go. I'm like, okay, well, you might be smart enough to figure that out. I'm not. What I can do is I can look at the person in front of me and I can treat them like a human being. I can look at the person in front of me and I can know that hopefully my mind and my heart has been shaped by the truth that's been communicated by the gospel and by the church for the last 2,000 years. And that my approach to them can be, doesn't have to be either convincing them or condemning them, but in many ways just kind of receiving them.
I want to pivot a little bit to the Bible in a Year podcast. Catholics are notoriously ignorant. That's sort of like the joke, I would say, even amongst ourselves.
Right.
So, we go to Mass, we don't have to read it. I'm going to be honest, I've never had the urge to read the whole thing front to back. I look at how big, particularly the Old Testament is, and I just go, I will probably absorb that if I go to enough Masses, right?
Right.
Am I wrong? Should I really be trying to get the whole thing? Ashley's read it.
Yeah. Well, I had to
cover.
for school.
Yeah, okay, but am I wrong in that approach, or it seems like a lot of people want to do the whole thing, which speaks to the success of the podcast.
Right. So here's what I would say. I won't. I'm going to quote maybe a person that you've heard before, and maybe a quote that you've heard before. St. Jerome, you might know what I'm going to say, said, "Ignorance of Scripture is ignorance of Christ." Mm-hmm. So when someone says, "I'm Catholic, I don't need to know the Bible," what they might be saying, if it's true, "I'm Catholic, I don't need to know Jesus."
Is that what you're saying, Zach?
Not what I'm trying to.
Wait, no, exactly. That's why I'm saying, like, I know wouldn't be saying that because why? Because we also, there are saints who weren't literate, right? There are saints who they showed up for Mass and they had the word proclaimed to them. There are saints who, like, why do we have, stained glass windows? Not just because it's beautiful and because it's art, because it's telling a story. We meditate on the mysteries of the Rosary because, just by meditating on these 15, now 20, scenes in Jesus's life, sanctity. You can grow in holiness, right? You can grow in grace, faith, hope, and love. So, in answer, someone who's illiterate, yes, 100% can still become a great saint without reading the Bible themselves straight through from front to back. The question I would wonder is, or I would maybe ponder aloud, would be: is there a part of any of our hearts that just says, "But I want to know what's in there"? Like, I want to know what's been entrusted to me as a child of the Father. Because what does Dave Verboom say about Scripture? It says that the Father condescends to us and speaks to us as to his children. And there's something about that would say, like, okay, this belongs to my dad, and he wants me to have it. So if I have a hesitancy about that, well, where does that hesitancy come from? Maybe it's not because I'm wrong. It might just be because I'm intimidated. It might not be because I'm doing something bad. It might just be, I don't know. It could be a lot of reasons other than I'm just wrong for not wanting it. So, but I would, any thoughts?
Well, I guess I am literate, so I should probably try to look into it a
you
little
can also
more.
Listen.
Yeah.
Exactly, yes.
So speaking of listening, one thing that kind of took me by surprise, but maybe shouldn't have, was that your podcast comes with a parental discretion advised little note because of, and it's like, you don't really think of the Bible as explicit content, but then you go through the stories and you're like, well, yeah.
This is a little bit like Game of Thrones.
Yeah. That was,
No, go ahead.
Yeah, that came out of lived experience. That came out of reading and posting and having parents write in and call in saying, you should have given us a heads up before you read about these scenes. And like, oh yeah, we probably should have. And that's one of the things about the Bible, and it took so many people. That first year we did it, took so many people by surprise, was how many people we're saying, wait a second, there is so much brokenness. There is so much darkness. Like, I think, and I keep coming back to this image, I think people kept expecting to hear the Hallmark version of the Bible. Is that even like, think about, we can even kind of Hallmarkify the story of Noah and the flood, where it's like, we forget about all the people who died and like, yeah, but there's this boat with all the animals on it and there's a rainbow at the end.
And I have a Fisher Price toy set of Noah and all the animals.
What do you say to people where it's like a real stumbling block for them? They look at the Old Testament and they're like, this is not the God I thought I met in the Gospels, and I don't know if I want to affiliate with that.
Well, because like human brokenness is one thing, and that I can definitely
God being wrathful and killing people is harder.
Yeah, that's a great question because was one of the things we recognize is that the God of the Hebrew Scriptures and Christian Scriptures is the same God, and that as God, He is fully good. So I love the fact that even in Genesis, here's this first book of the Bible. After the first 11 chapters, you have the story of Abraham. And what's one of the first stories in the saga of Abraham being called from his homeland to go to the promised land? One of the first stories is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, where here's Abraham standing outside this city. And God says, I'm going to go down and I'm going to destroy it because it's just the wickedness. The cries of the people in that city have come to me, reach my ears. So here's God out of justice I'm going to do something about this. And what does Abraham say? But God, what if there's 50 righteous people there? And he has to ask this question because he doesn't know who God is yet. God could be just like any of the Middle Eastern gods or the Roman and Greco-Roman gods. It's just like, no, I'm just ticked off, so I'm going to extol my wrath. But here's God who's saying, no, I'm just, and people have been crying out for me to do something, so I'm going to do it. But what about 50 righteous people? No, and you know the story. Abraham gets them all the way down to God saying, no, if there's even 10 righteous people, I will not destroy it for the sake of those 10. So in that moment, from the very first part of the Bible, one of the things God is establishing is, you need to know this about me. I'm good and I'm just. And I am not going to destroy someone, or not going to destroy this city if there's a possibility of it not being the just and right thing to do. And so then all that begins to shape the lens, right, of everything we're reading after that, of like, okay, but here's what God has told us about himself. If we can rely on this at all, the revelation of God at all, what he said is, I will not allow evil to go on forever because I'm good. And I also will not punish the innocent with the guilty because I'm just. And I think that's really important. And I think, that's a big piece of what we need to understand.
Did the process, maybe the first time you went through this, anything surprise you or stick out to you about your relationship to Scripture, or maybe any passages?
I learned a lot. That was great. There were. I really, really like what you said earlier about the fact that you can get a lot of the Bible just by going to Mass. I mean, that's one of the greatest gifts. Is how many times people who did the Bible in a year who are like, oh, I know this already. Oh, I knew this already. I just didn't know the context for it. So that's so good. So what surprised me, golly, here's what surprised me. I thought that the hardest part to get through was going to be like Leviticus. Some of those kind of Numbers, Leviticus, that kind of area where it's going to be dry and kind of just going through some rules. And it was far more challenging, but also more rewarding to get through the prophets. The prophets is this massive section. Yeah. And I'm like, well, they all sound like they're saying the same thing. Like, what the heck? And so finally, when I was able to like read them, not just on their own, but concurrently with others, and having to constantly, because I don't know if you've ever been in this place where you're reading the Bible or any other book, and you're just kind of like, yep, I'm getting through it. I did chapter 5 today. And you're just like, check, moving on. But if in this case, for me, I had to not just read it out loud, I had to also explain it. It's like, I better understand it. If I'm going to explain this, I better understand this. And so there was a lot of study that went into getting ready, especially for the prophets, because again, they go on for chapter upon chapter. And it's like, you ended up saying kind of the same thing you said at the beginning. So how is it different? And how is it important that it's different? And so that was a real big surprise, and I loved it. It was challenging, but it was I got a lot out of the prophets in a way that I hadn't anticipated.
What about Jesus? I'm curious I'm imagining you probably spent more time sitting with the Gospels in your own formation. Right. But did this approach change your relationship with him at all?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because that's what it's all about, right? It's not just about, I read the book. It's about, okay, did that reading of the Word get you closer to him, the Word, right? To Jesus himself. And I would say yes. In so many ways, I've always loved, so Dr. Brant Petrie he's a scripture scholar who has written a series of books that, Jesus and the Jewish roots of Mary and the Jewish roots of so he always wants to point back to the Jewish roots, and always points out how the New Testament and Christ himself didn't come out of a vacuum. They came out of, the Hebrew Jewish tradition and Jewish people, like it's fully Jewish. And I've always loved how he has made that connection for ordinary people like us. So reading it myself was just like, oh my gosh, Jesus, here you are again. Like, because, 3/4 of the year are spent in the Old Testament. But I found myself for 3/4 of the year reading something, even like something in Leviticus, which again, it's dry, it's so boring, whatever. But then going into Mass and being, oh my gosh, this is that. There were so many connections between here is what God commanded in Leviticus, and here's what we do at every single Mass. And it just blew my mind. In fact, I remember we had a bishop be ordained here in my diocese during the middle of reading. And this man came up to me and he said, hey, that was incredible. After the ordination, he said, all I kept thinking about was, that's in the Bible. That's in the Bible. Like all the things, this rite of the ordination of the bishop. And I was like, yeah, isn't that incredible? So that's one of the ways I found Jesus more and more present in the Old Testament. And then it pointed to, here's an example. Gosh, coming into Mass, I can, just go to Mass every day or offer Mass every day. There's a temptation to, I know the moves, and I know this is important. And I know, here's consecration, really big deal. But then there's some what in my mind had become like side things. Just like here's this move you do over here. Here's when you putting on the vestments. But then you go back to, in the Old Testament, the vestments were very important. This was absolutely crucial. You'd be purified, and then you'd put on the priestly garments, and then you'd go into the temple. And then I was like, oh my gosh, Lord, I need to be constantly aware that not just the big moment is a big moment, but even these other moments are moments you've been preparing for thousands of years for me to be here and just prepare my own heart for Mass. So that's, and it was just, and because of that, it was like, Jesus, you're here already. Yes, you're here in the Eucharist, but you're here already as I'm doing this. That was really powerful for me.
Okay. I want to switch gears again. I mentioned earlier that your podcast has been massively successful, but even before that, you have YouTube videos that rack up millions of views, hundreds of thousands of views. So last week, we're talking in September. We spoke with Caitlin Beatty. She's coming from an evangelical tradition, but she has a book about kind of the dangers of celebrity pastors. And so, as someone with a little bit of celebrity yourself, I'm wondering, what are some of the temptations you're facing, and how do you deal with that in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really funny that on day-to-day life, there is no celebrity whatsoever. Like it's just I'm on campus. I mean, in some ways I wish there were, because that might mean it'd be easier to, bring more students to get in the encounter to the Lord. I will have, occasionally there'll be students who will show up and say, oh yeah, we had to watch your videos in religious ed, or my mom loves you. I get that one a lot. My mom loves you. Like, okay, thank you very much. You should come to church. But one of the things I remember, I was working a youth conference a bunch of years ago, and Twitter had just come into my life, and so I don't know how long it had existed, but I had it. And as I was flying away, I tweeted something out like, hey, thank you, youth conference, blah 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 blah. It was great, and fly away, and I land and get back up to Duluth, and a former student had her phone, and she says, "What's this?" She held up her phone to the tweet. I was like, I don't know. It's a tweet. She said, no. This is how celebrities tweet. You're a priest. You're not a celebrity. You don't tweet like this. And I was like, yeah, you're right. You're completely right. That's how people who, I don't want to say want to have a voice, or people who, that's not how, maybe other priests might, but I was really convicted that moment. Like, no, that's not me. That is not where I live. Where I live is right here with these students who are right in front of me. It'd be remarkable. Like well, I'll go to there's a Seek the Focus conference, national conference, and there's some, Steubenville youth conferences and other kind of conferences and stuff, adult conferences, and people will want to talk, which is wonderful. And here's a photo, but I literally have never been asked for anything like that where I normally live. And in some ways you could say it's like someone goes away and does something, whatever that thing is that might be important in the eyes of people or the world. And then they come home and their kids don't care at all about what they've been doing. All they care about is, are you here for me? And that's where I live. So I get to do things like this, which is awesome, and talk to really interesting people. But literally right after this, I will head down, finish vacuuming the basement for students to show up, hear confessions, offer Mass, and then just try to be as present to our students tonight as possible.
It's funny because especially during the pandemic, I feel like I've heard from a lot of people, and my own in-laws, really they kind of globbed onto you as a pastor for them when they didn't have access to their local parish. And now that people are coming back to Mass, if you're not people have become sort of virtual parishioners at places. They might, even if they're going to their, the church in their town, they might be getting like a second homily, or they might stream mass somewhere else. What do you think that's maybe a good thing, a dangerous thing for the church as we move away from the pandemic?
It's a good question. I would say this. I would say that when I had a conversion around 15, 16 years old, and where Jesus was, I heard about him. Church, God, I knew about that because I had to go to Catholic elementary school. I had to go to mass every Sunday. But then there was a moment where, like, oh no, like this is real. This is true. And I didn't have anywhere I could turn to get, like, how do I grow? Like, my parents are wonderful people, and they're the ones who brought us to mass, and so they had faith. But I wasn't going to ask them, like, Mom, how do I pray the rosary? Or whatever the thing is, or I have a question about X, Y, or Z. I'm not going to ask them just because that's my disposition. And I didn't have a youth pastor, youth minister. My priest, like, maybe I could talk to him, but I didn't really feel like I could. Though good people all around, but I didn't know what my resources were. And I think there's some aspect of being able to say, again, the difference between a celebrity pastor or celebrity priest and one I can trust, because that's not the same thing. Mm-hmm. And when we find someone that, to some degree at least, that we can trust, like I know that for the most part they're not going to lead me astray, but I needed formation. I wanted it. I didn't have anyone in my hometown who was offering, or felt like I could ask. So I think sometimes, back in the day it was tapes. Here's some tapes. Now here's a podcast that maybe I can get. Maybe I personally can offer through a quick little video, or through the other homily that they're going to hear that day on Sunday, something that maybe will help them take the next step in their relationship with the Lord. That's what I'm. It's
interesting because it's such a double-edged sword too, because a lot of people would say, like, either YouTube's algorithm, you're always like maybe like 10 clicks away from like being radicalized into something terrible, just based on its algorithm. And so like the internet's both this like resource for, like maybe your 15, 16-year-old self, but also a lot of teenagers fall into really dark rabbit holes there. And then I think maybe other people, I think I agree with you typically about people need to have access to these types of things. But some people would say, like, you can't have formation without, proximity.
Relationship.
Encounter.
And relationships can't be one way.
Yeah. No, I 100%. I would say that in absence, maybe you'll say this, in the absence of those real, because I mean that's the detriment too. Is I could even say this. I could say, looking at myself and say, well, yeah, I read those books and I listened to some tapes and I got information that was really, really good. But I wasn't ever taught in that age, at least. Well, here's how you are vulnerable with someone in a really healthy way. Here's how here's what it looks like when someone disciples you in a really good way. I had to cobble it together and kind of figure it out as I was going. But yeah, so I would say, kind of like how, a lot of times we say that the church doesn't need another program, doesn't need another, DVD set, it doesn't need another whatever. And it's true, because there's something more important. At the same time, here I am in a small town in northern Minnesota, and I don't have anyone who can really teach confirmation, some of these really difficult topics in a really compelling way. But we do have this DVD here. We do have this streaming thing. And so maybe there's a combination. I don't know. It's kind of just a whole mess that I think that as long as we don't rely too heavily upon that crutch, it could be worse.
As someone who makes podcasts, I'm happy you gave that
he's
answer
talking
too.
to himself.
Yeah. The case for more content, I'm really into, so that's fine with me.
Right. But in the vein of needing both the local community and podcasts, we will let you get to vacuuming and your students after one final question that we ask all of our guests, which is, if you could canonize one person, Catholic or not, living or dead, fictional or real, who would it be and why?
There's a couple people. If you wanted to say historical figures I didn't know, So I'm not gonna. I really like C.S. Lewis, but I don't know him personally, so I don't have any idea. But I would say that there's a girl named Mallory Norell who, just shy of 16 years old, passed away from cancer a couple of years ago. And her last year of her life, she witnessed to the Lord and trust in God so powerfully. She had come to our camps that we put on for junior high students with her sister, and they have more siblings too who are awesome. But she and her sister came back from camp, and every day they would try to do their Lectio Divina. We taught them, and they'd pick out a rose and a thorn, and she wrote in her journal, these. And even when she was diagnosed with cancer, even that day, she wrote in her journal, this day was hard, and my thorn was being diagnosed with cancer. My rose, maybe that was my rose too. And she said, spending time with Jesus in the Eucharist after being diagnosed. Yeah, and I remember even the days leading up, the weeks leading up to her death. She was like, listen, I'm going to pray for healing. The God heals me and gives me life. But if he doesn't, I just want him to be known. I just want him to be glorified. So if he heals me and he's glorified, that's awesome. And if he doesn't heal me and I die, then that's awesome. That's for his glory. And so for Mal, that would be, if I could canonize anybody, I think it'd be Mal.
Saint Mal. Mike, thank you so much for witnessing to Mallory's life and to sharing your ministry with us. You can find Father Mike where you're listening to this, the Bible in a Year podcast, and you've got one coming up, right? A new podcast,
we have the Catechism in a Year. Catechism in a Year starting in a couple months, so January 1st.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for watching that conversation with Father Mike Schmitz. If you enjoyed it, please check out Jesuitical wherever you listen to podcasts. And before you go, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for stopping by.